Hello, this is part 6 of our Building with Claude API series. And in this video, we're going to talk about prompt evaluations. When it comes to creating prompts for LLMs, there are these two skills that we need to develop. The first one is prompt engineering, and the other one is prompt evaluations. We'll talk about prompt engineering in a later video. In this video, we are focusing on prompt evaluations. The skill of prompt evaluation is essentially testing the prompts that we have and validating whether they are actually viable in all different scenarios. Now, especially with AI-powered apps, our users are going to be giving all these different types of prompts. We would also have some prompts in place. So app itself is going to have a bunch of prompts. And then the user is also going to be giving a bunch of prompts. And usually the user prompt gets merged into the app prompt. Now, when we're dealing with all these different prompts that are coming into our application, which we pass on to Claude or any other LLM, we would need to be sure that the prompts that we have actually achieve what we want it to do, right? So it is basically this process of validating, right? You can think of it something like tests that we write in a traditional application, right? So this is essentially tests for our prompts. So when it comes to setting up this prompt evaluation mechanism, it is usually a pipeline. So it is a prompt evaluation pipeline. Okay, so what are the different parts of this pipeline? In this pipeline, as a first step, we need to generate data, all the different types of prompts that we can run into our application, right? So we would need some sort of a data generation. And after we generate all the prompts, we need to actually run them on a model of our choice, right? And then we need to create the responses that we receive by means of running each of these prompts. And that's how we'll know whether all the different types of prompts that we have give us a response that makes sense. Now, let's just go a bit deeper into each of them before we actually see the code for setting all these things up. When it comes to the data generation, it's essentially all the different prompt generation, right? We could use a faster and lighter model, something like Haiku, to actually generate all the different types of prompts that the user would usually give into our application. And these lists of prompts, we need to then run them in our application with, again, a model of our choice. But here we would be merging our app prompts with the user prompts. Okay, so this is where the merging happens, and the actual full prompt is over here. So this is basically just the mock user prompts that get generated, and that list of mock user prompts comes here, and at this stage we merge the user prompts with the app prompt. Okay, then we actually get the full prompt that is fed to the model when we run the application. And the response that comes out of this, right? So the response that comes out of this is what is evaluated here. So basically in this grading stage, we'll take the response and we will grade them at this step. So the grading could be done in a numerical manner. So we could either grade it from like 0 to 100 or 0.0 to 1.0. It's up to us. Basically, you can even say 0 to 10. Okay, it is just up to us. We can set some sort of a numerical range to help us get a sense of the health of all the prompts that we ran. And when it comes to this grading process, we could do it in 3 different ways. Either do it with code. Okay, so we can, for example, if we are generating some sort of a Python script or some sort of a JSON data, you can just evaluate it. You can just run it and check if the syntax is all right. We can also do it with models. Okay, we can actually have another model run some tests and check if it is actually like aligned to the response that you are expecting. Or we can actually have humans doing the evaluations. Okay, this is like the slowest way to evaluate, but that is also a viable option. In this video, we will specifically focus on setting up graders with code and model. This essentially is the pipeline that we are looking at, okay, when it comes to prompt evaluation pipeline. Now, the application that we are considering for this demonstration is an application that logs tasks, okay? It's a task logging application. The user will be able to use natural language and describe the things that she did in a particular day or a particular time in a day. Automatically, the application would create entries for the work. The task start time and the end time would be logged based on the input. Okay, so let's open up VS Code. So here we have a Jupyter notebook. It's number 6. So all of this code is available in the GitHub repo. I will add the link of the GitHub repo along with this video. All right, so let's start with the first step of the pipeline, data generation. Now, when it comes to data generation, we are just like, generating a bunch of data set using Haiku. And this is the prompt that we are using to create the data set. So data set is essentially a bunch of prompts. You can go through the prompt directly from the file. The idea that we are conveying here to the LLM is we wanted to generate this evaluation data set, basically for prompt evaluation. We want this particular prompt to create this JSON output, and it just needs to have a key called description and the description itself. For example, we have even given us example output, what we would want. So from noon, I did a bit of coding for 2 hours, and then I had a break for 1 hour, and after that, I spent 30 minutes reading. Okay, that's basically the example prompt that we have given. And by means of setting this up, it is going to generate all the different types of prompts for us. Yeah, here asking it to generate 3 prompts. By means of feeding this into our chat method, basically into our LLM. So this basically calls a client create, and it will get us back the response. So just by doing that, we get back that JSON object. Okay, we then load it to make it into a dictionary that we can then use it in Python. But this is the prompt that is going to generate a bunch of user prompts. It's going to mock and give us this list of prompts, all these lists of descriptions. This is basically how you would generate the data set. It's quite simple. We just use Claude itself to create this list of descriptions. So that's the first step. Now let's move on to the next step, where we run the list of prompts that we get. Once we got the data set, which is this list of user prompts, we feed it into a method called run eval. So this is basically the second step here. We are going to be running the prompts. Let's go into that, and we can see that we're just looping through the data set that we received. Each test case is again just a dictionary. We pass it into this run test case method. So this is where we are going to be running the prompt as how it will be run in the app. That output that we receive from the application, right, we then validate it by the model. So this is the model validation that we were talking about. And then we're also going to be validating the same output with code. So with code, basically, we're just going to check if the formatting is all right and we're able to actually use it. Only if both of them return true, we say this is valid. Let's look at running the prompt and validating the model and validating by code. Let's look at each of them one by one. So we pass in the user description. So basically, since this test case that we receive is that dictionary, which then contains the actual description, which is essentially the user prompt, we pass it into the run prompt. When you look over here, this is actually the application code. We merge the user prompt to the application's prompt. This is the application prompt that stays in the application. Okay, so the user prompt keeps changing based on whatever the user gives, but the application prompt is over here. So it says format the start time, the end time, and the work that was done as a JSON from the below user prompt. Okay, so this is like the staging that we set up, right? The staging prompt as to what is going to come. And then we are merging this application prompt with the user prompt. So this is what we described over here. The application prompt gets merged to the user prompt. So that's it. So this is the prompt. And then we also give it a bit of example, okay? In the prompt, we say this is the kind of output that we are expecting. We want it to be a JSON for each task. The task name should be mentioned. The start time and the end time should also be logged. Now, this information is going to be inferred by the AI model from the natural language description that comes into it. And we just send it to our AI client, and that gives us that response, okay? It's going to give us this particular JSON object. What we do is we just load that JSON object as a Python dictionary over here, and return it back as output. Now that output, we are sending it to another model. Here we give the user description and the output. So when you go here to the validate by model method, you can see the original user description is given. Okay, the original user prompt is over here, and the output that was generated by the other model is also given. This is another prompt, and here we are saying you are an expert in reviewing Python dictionaries that were created from natural language descriptions. Your task is to review the dictionary output generated by a model based on the natural language description of various tasks done in different times of the day. Okay, so we just ask this model now to behave as a reviewer of the output that was generated by the other model, and we give the original user description that was given by the user, and we also give it the output that was generated by the other prompt. Okay, and then we give it a bit of instructions as to what we want the output format to be. Provide your evaluation as structured JSON object. We want these three things. We want trends, weaknesses, and reasoning. Only then we want this model to respond to us and let us know whether this is actually valid response that is created by the other model. A thing to note is, if you just ask it to just respond is valid, sometimes you might not know the reasoning behind why it actually validated or not validated a particular response. So it's always good to have these three things: strengths of that response and the weaknesses and the reasoning. In this way, the model itself is like having that context. It actually goes through the process of understanding the strengths and weaknesses of that response from the other model, and then also it gives you a concise reasoning as to why it is taking a call as to whether it is valid or not. And we want this again to just be a JSON response, and since it's JSON, we just like load it again as a Python dictionary. And throughout the code, we're making use of the concept that we discussed earlier of having the pre-filled assistant message and stop sequences. This helps basically to get formatted responses back to us. So let's go back and now see how we are validating the same output with code. Now, the cool thing about validating by code is, since we know for a fact that this needs to be a dictionary, so we can just go here and iterate through every entry, right? Like, for each of the tasks and check if these keys like task, start time and end time are present. If those keys are there, then it is a valid entry. We're just checking if these three keys exist. We can also add additional validations here in code to check if the value of each of these keys, the value of the key task or start time and end time, is actually present. And if it's not, we can also return false here. So that's also another check that we can do. So the cool thing is, we are using both code in a traditional sense to check if the response we have received is actually what we expected, and we are also using our LLMs, right? So we are using our models also to check if the response that we received is actually valid. So we get our output by running the prompt with app code, and that output we are feeding it along with the original user description to get validated by the model. So in this step, it's essentially doing the same thing again, but with another model and validating, just making sure that that model is also agreeing with whatever output was returned by the original model. And then we also validating the response with code. We're just using just Python regular code to check if the dictionary has the keys that we intended each entry to have. And if both of these validations are returned true, right? So that's basically what we are doing. If both the result from the model is valid and the result from the code is valid, only then we accept that this particular prompt, right, that mock user prompt is actually valid, and we hold that value here. Along with this, we also hold the reasoning that was done by the model for us to evaluate if, for some reason, if a particular prompt fails, at least we know why it marked it as not valid. And then we also have the user description that came in and also the output that got generated by the original model of our app. So this is basically the structure of the result that we gather for each prompt that goes through this pipeline. So that's essentially this step of grading. So let's run this now and see the results that we get. And usually when you run this pipeline, it takes a couple of seconds. Okay, so sometimes it even takes 20 to 30 seconds because you are having these three different prompts. First of all, the three different prompts themselves were generated here. So we are generating three different prompts from the LLM, and then each of those prompts we're then again running it here with another LLM, and then we are also grading each of them with another LLM. So we're calling the LLM 3 times here, 3 times here, and 3 times here, right? So totally 9 times we are calling our LLM through the API in this pipeline. Now, as you increase the data set count, the time it takes to run through this evaluation pipeline might increase. Okay, so just be mindful of that. Okay, so for us, at least in this scenario, it took us about 13 seconds. Let's look at the results that came back. Cool. It looks like we got a full score. If some tests fail, we would have gotten a decimal value here, because the way we are scoring it is for every result that we got from the results. So there are these 3 results that we have received, right? We check if it is valid and we divide it by the number of results here in 3. So we have 3 here and divided by 3, we got 1. So that means, it's essentially we call it as pass. And here we have the result of each of the prompt, right? So the first one is true. You can see the user description here. So it says started working at 9 a.m. for 2 hours, lunch break from 11 a.m. to 12 p.m., meeting from 12 p.m. to 1 p.m., coding from 1 p.m. to 5 p.m. Okay, so this is like a typical user input in natural language that a user would give. And from that, we can see the dictionary that got created for us. Here you can see the task was work, start time, end time, and then lunch break, start time, end time, and then you also have meeting, start time, end time, coding, start time, end time. And it even tells us the reasoning why this works. This is right. So the same thing is what we're getting for the other user prompts as well. So this is basically how we can run this prompt evaluation pipeline. So let's tweak the prompt a bit to see if we might get something different. Okay, so what we'll do is the data set that we are generating right at this stage, the data generation stage, let's maybe remove this particular point. So here we have this point stating make sure the start and end time for each task is included, but a user might not necessarily give a end time. Like she might just say I went to the gym at 6 a.m. today and then I did coding at 12 p.m. right? So in that case, what's going to happen if the user did not specify an end time? I've just removed that particular line, and now let's run it again and see what happens. And see, now we have a different score. It looks like one of the prompt actually failed. It looks like the first prompt actually failed. The other 2 prompts, yeah, like the second prompt is succeeded and the third prompt is also succeeded. So the first prompt failed, okay? Just because we removed that line, right? Okay, let's see why. Because it looks like the timing is unknown for something. Okay, let's look at this. So the user description was morning jog for 30 minutes, then breakfast, afternoon meeting at 2 p.m. for 1 hour, evening gym session. Okay, so now here the user prompt is a bit not complete, right? It doesn't give you the start time and end time of each of these tasks. And because of that, the JSON has all these unknown values. And that's why the model flagged this response as not valid. Now, because of this, we can either make sure the user will always give us the start time and end time. We can flag it in the app itself. So if the user gives us a prompt that doesn't have a start time and end time for a particular task, we can just like let the user know that if you don't give me a start time and end time, I won't be able to log it properly. Or we could refine the app in such a way that if the user doesn't give the start time and end time, we just set this to be like not available or unknown. And we can let the model that is grading know that this is an acceptable response. It's just up to us to decide how we want to set this up. This is so cool that by means of changing the prompt, right, we are getting these different scores. So this is a more tangible way for us to refine the health of the prompts that are in our application. Okay, let's revert our generate dataset prompt to ensure that each of the user prompts actually has a start and end time for each task. With that, if we run the pipeline again, we can see all the 3 tests pass and all the 3 inputs are again valid. Having these validators in place helps us to make sure the prompt pipeline, right? The prompts that we have in our application are actually valid, and it would give us consistent results every time we make use of it. So this is basically how we can set up a prompt evaluation pipeline for our AI-powered applications. Follow along if you're exploring AI for your workflows.